Okay, here we are. Welcome, everybody, to our Friday Fireside Chat. Let me just make sure that we've got everything set up here. I have some new equipment, so I just need a moment to make some adjustments. I thought I had everything perfectly set up, and then, of course, you go live and the camera looks a little different. So, welcome everybody to our Friday Fireside Chat. I'm so excited to be here with all of you on all the platforms. So we're going live on Perform Live. We're going live on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. We already have one person joining us on one of the platforms. I'm really excited about today's topic. So as you all know, give us a little extra light here. Maybe I'll give us a little extra light here. Anyway, as you all know, every Friday we come on and have these fireside chats, and we have a topic that we get into, something that either is something that I am working through as an individual cultivating radical resilience, or perhaps something that I am encountering with a client in the work. And so it's a nice opportunity for me to come on, share with you some insights about some aspect of radical resilience, and ultimately offer you some possible flash coaching. So here we are, and today's topic is one that is really near and dear to my own heart. So some of you may know, some of you may not know, but the radical resilience transformation process consists of 7 pillars. And there's pillars that reside in the category of healing. There's pillars that reside in the category of learning how to thrive. And then there is the ultimate goal of the radical resilience process, which is to come home to yourself and really understand who you are and what your purpose is here on this planet. And so within the healing category, the pillar of unconditional acceptance is an opportunity to both be a jumping off point for us and something that we need to keep coming back to throughout the process as well. So unconditional acceptance is about, firstly, learning how to surrender and say yes and accept what is going on in the moment, so that you're not pushing against it and resisting it or numbing it out or shoving it down, but finally kind of having that proverbial hitting the knees moment where you decide that you just can't keep doing it the same way anymore. And ultimately you give it up to a higher power, you give it up to the God of your understanding, and you surrender in the moment. And then the other aspect of unconditional acceptance is learning how to unconditionally accept yourself, unconditionally accept other people, by recognizing that they are all just human beings like you, going through an experience, that other people have their wounds, that other people have their experiences, the sum total of what makes them who they are, and that we have an opportunity here to practice our humanity. And then the other element of unconditional acceptance is that we need to learn how to be with and process difficult emotions. So I know we got into this a little bit last week, which was really all about like leaning in and saying yes. And so this week, I really want to talk a little bit more about spiritual bypassing, which is a pretty popular term these days, really dealing with unresolved baggage and unresolved trauma, and how to process emotions in real time so that it doesn't turn into baggage, right? Because that is how baggage is formed, when we're having an emotion in the moment because something has happened, and we end up taking that energy and shoving it down, rather than doing what Emily and Amelia Nagoski so beautifully and poignantly talk about in their book, Burnout, which is to complete the stress cycle. When we don't complete what they call the stress cycle, what happens is we get stuck in a stress loop, and literally that is how burnout can happen. And believe it or not, it tends to happen more often than not for women. And it's because our society has programmed us, and we've sort of bought into that programming, that for us to, express an emotion or ultimately even have an emotion about something is less than savory. And what we really need to do is just kind of be still and small and quiet, rather than expressing what's going on with ourselves. So I'm seeing that Kumji just joined us. Welcome, friend, on Perform Live. I know we got a few folks watching us on some of the other platforms as well. So let's firstly talk about what is spiritual bypassing. So it is a very popular term these days that you might have heard. And really, spiritual bypassing is something that unfortunately happens often inside of certain spiritual circles. And there are certain Enneagram types that tend to veer over into that realm as well, because it's easier, quote unquote, to them, or in their mind, their personality structure might say it's easier for me to just pretend that everything is okay and sort of sugarcoat it and put a shiny, happy face on and say everything's okay. Or, you know what, I'm not bothered by this. All is well. I'm a spiritual being. And so kumbaya, I'm just going to sit still, breathe, and meditate, and everything will be okay. And the truth is that what we're doing in those scenarios is really inviting the possibility for more baggage to occur. So we'll talk in a moment about what's baggage versus just having an emotion in real time. But spiritual bypassing is sort of the refusal to accept that we're human beings and that we are having a human experience and that we do have human emotions and that our gorgeous human personality structures have certain ways of coping and dealing and ultimately learning how to survive, and that is okay, that we are entitled, in fact, to feel emotions, to have opinions about things, and to have very real human responses to things. The trap, of course, is that we get overly identified, and that's what we talked about last week. And we start to think that we are those emotions, or we stay in that stress cycle. We stay kind of looping in that emotion. And that's really where we get into trouble. So we don't want to dismiss the emotions, but we also don't want to get stuck there either. So what do we do? Well, let's firstly talk about what is baggage versus just having an emotion in the moment. The way that you can identify if you have some real emotional baggage about something is that your response to what is happening in the moment is seemingly out of proportion to what's happening. So maybe you're driving down the street and somebody cuts you off in traffic, and rather than just being annoyed, you go into a full-on rage and you want to like chase that person down and have a confrontation. Maybe you're watching a movie and something sad happens within the context of it, and it might be appropriate to shed a few tears, but you find yourself going into uncontrollable fits of sobbing and you can't seem to make yourself stop. So that's a pretty clear indicator that there's some baggage there. And really what that means is that you have a lot of that particular emotion kind of stored up in your nervous system. And because emotions from a metaphysical or energetic perspective are magnetic, what happens is that you have an emotion in the moment, and all the other emotions that you've experienced in the past and all of that stored up, say anger or sadness, come and kind of latch on to the emotion that you're experiencing in the moment. Everything gets amplified and sort of, you could say, blown out of proportion, where then the response you're having to what's happening seems disproportionate to the thing that actually occurred. That's a pretty clear indicator that we have some baggage. Other indicators of baggage is that we have certain diseases in the body, right? So maybe, you have high blood pressure or heart problems, which is often associated with anger. We could go into other sort of symptomatic things, but generally speaking, when we haven't processed trauma, when we haven't processed emotions, we end up storing that in the soma in some way, right? So I don't know if you've heard this funny little adage of the issues are in your tissues, right? So that ends up kind of getting held inside, and we end up, with some ailment or some kind of inexplicable thing happening to us, like fibromyalgia or, things that they can't really point to as far as a cause. So we want to avoid creating more baggage. Now, do we all have baggage? 100%. Absolutely. We don't want to accept that we do, but we all do because we came in with some of it, right? Because we've got some generational stuff. Thank you, mom and dad and grandparents, right? And, whether or not you believe in past lives, there's a pretty good compelling case out there that past lives are a thing and that we bring things with us from past lives as well. And then, of course, there's just what happens in our lives from a very young age, from in the womb, in our formative years, all the way up to present moment, where things that have occurred could have compounded and ultimately created all this baggage. So we all have it. So what do we do with it? So how do we process unresolved baggage? Well, there's a lot of different modalities and tools that we can implement to clear out that baggage. I've got a whole bag full of them, that I utilize with clients to clear that baggage from the nervous system and out of the physiology and out of the soma. A lot of great ways to do that. And then we want to avoid creating new baggage, which is that we need to learn the skill of unconditional acceptance. And that sort of third component that I talked about, which is how do I navigate difficult emotions as they come up, complete the stress cycle so that I don't stay stuck in that stress loop, burn myself out, and ultimately create more baggage and more stuff that's getting stored in my nervous system and in my soma. So there are a few different things that we can do. Firstly, we want to recognize that we're having an emotion, right? Certain Enneagram types pretty much dissociate from their emotions because it's uncomfortable to feel them. I won't get into like the types and what type does what, but some Enneagram types will cover up other emotions by doing things like just defaulting to anger. Other Enneagram types just sort of disconnect from their heart space and won't experience the emotion of shame or sadness because they simply don't have time for it, right? Because they're busy doing other things. So there's a lot of different ways in terms of our personality structures that we go about bypassing or avoiding or not processing emotions. So the first thing is just to slow down, get present, and recognize that you are having an emotion, and maybe even sit with the sensation of whatever that emotion is in your body. And for some of us, we might need to sit with the sensation first before we can even name what the emotion is. So we might need to slow down enough and journal, for example, just to kind of process the thoughts that are going through the mind so that we can clear out some of the busyness of the mind and connect with the emotion or the energy that's going on. And then once we've named it and we can really be with the experience of that in our physical body, then we can look at how we want to process that out. For some of us, just picking up the phone like I did today, because I was for sure having some feels about some stuff, picking up the phone and calling somebody and processing it verbally, right? Just talking it through so that energy can discharge and come out of the body is really helpful. For some of us, and this is also true for me, doing something physical really, really helps, right? So go for a run, take a yoga class, maybe put on some music and dance around your apartment kind of strenuously so that energy has somewhere to go, right? Because just because the stressor went away doesn't mean that the stress has been processed in the body. Other things that you can do is just some breathing, right? Just the act of like stopping, slowing down, and doing some breathing exercises. And if you want to know more about some breath work exercises that you can do, for sure, hit me up. I have a bunch of meditations that are on sale, Perform Live folks. If you want to download a series of like 4 meditations that you can do to process the stress that's coming up. Hugging somebody for 12 seconds can help process the stress from the body. Or if you have, a love in your life where you can kiss somebody for up to 6 seconds, that can be really helpful too. So all of these different possible ways of completing the stress cycle are in the book Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. And there's certainly other things that you can do as well to help process the stress and to process the emotions and get them out of your body. Another thing might be if you're feeling angry, that you quite literally take a baseball bat to a pillow so you can discharge that emotion. I've for sure done that. Tosha Silver, in her gorgeous book, It's Not Your Money, talks about going to Goodwill and buying some dishes and putting on protective eyewear and making sure your skin is covered up, and then just smashing some dishes in a garage or somewhere where you're protected and your neighbors aren't going to think you're crazy, right? So there's just so many different things we do. But at the end of the day, what we're really getting at here is avoiding spiritual bypassing by just pretending everything's okay. We want to avoid avoiding the emotions or numbing them out by doing things like, eating our emotions, binge watching Netflix, or covering up emotions with other emotions. And then we really want to recognize when we do have some baggage there and turn to a, guided, or turn to a qualified professional for some guidance, and have a guided process for releasing some of that trauma from the body and ultimately clearing that baggage, which I am 100% here for you if that's something that you are interested in doing. So that's the conversation, friends. That's the topic on the table. So if anyone wants some flash coaching, has a question, wants to address this idea of spiritual bypassing, maybe you've been guilty of it. I know I have. And I don't like even to use the word guilty. Maybe you have run that strategy, right? Where you're like, oh no, everything is okay. I'm totally okay. I'm a spiritual person. I've quote unquote done my work. So I don't have any emotions about that at all. It's like, well, that's a pretty clear indicator. If you have to declare that you've done your work and you're a spiritual person, there's a good likelihood that there's probably more work for you to do, because I've been there, right? So I'm telling you that I'm sharing that with you, not because I'm somehow, enlightened, but because I have run those strategies myself. And so I can recognize when I see that in somebody else because I've done it. So happy to chat with you guys if you'd like to. Otherwise, we're approaching our 15-minute mark, and we can totally close it up and I can sign off with you guys. So I'm just going to take a peek at all of our different platforms and see if anyone has any questions or comments. And if not, then we will call it a day. All right, lovelies. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us here for our Friday Fireside Chats. I want to say, if you have any requests, if something is up for you and you want a topic covered in these Fireside Chats, please feel free to send me a direct message or email, or however you want to get that communicated to me. We are changing our regular yoga time. We actually did that this week. So we're switching from Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to Tuesdays. So if you're somebody who joins us every week for the yoga classes, we're now going to be on Tuesday evenings, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and then everything in between, whatever time zone you happen to be in. And with that, I'm just going to wish you so much love, light, and aloha. Have a fantastic, fun, and safe weekend, and we will see you back here next week. Namaste, everybody.